The Jedi and the Sith are but two luminous threads woven into the vast tapestry of the Force. They dominate the conversation, their struggles shaping the galaxy's history, but to reduce the Force merely to their eternal duel is to mistake a single note for the entire symphony. The Force is ancient, eternal, and multifaceted. Every culture that touches it interprets it through its own lens, reshaping it into practices, rituals, and philosophies that transcend the binary struggle of light and dark. Are you ready to unlock the true secrets of the Force? That question challenges us to step beyond the well-trodden halls of the Jedi Temple or the shadowed corridors of Sith strongholds and into the far reaches of the galaxy, where other Force traditions pulse with vitality, wisdom, and danger. Perhaps no group illustrates the diversity of Force traditions better than the Night Sisters of Dathomir. To the Jedi, their ways seemed alien, even dangerous, for they channeled the Force through incantations, ichor, and ritual. Yet what the Jedi dismissed as sorcery was, in truth, a unique communion with the living energy of their world. Mother Talzin and her kin demonstrated abilities beyond conventional Force powers, bending matter, conjuring illusions, and even manipulating life and death itself. Shakespeare once wrote that, "There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy." So too with the Force. The Jedi, bound by doctrine, failed to grasp that the Night Sisters were not corrupting the Force, but expressing it through their own cultural vessel. Their art was not lesser, it was simply different. Before Yoda ever became the wise master we know, he encountered the Force priestesses, beings who embodied serenity, anger, joy, confusion, and sadness. It was through them that he unlocked the path to immortality, learning how to retain his consciousness after death. Without their guidance, there would be no luminous spirits of Obi-Wan, Yoda, or Anakin. Here lies a profound irony. The greatest secret of the Jedi, the ability to transcend death, did not come from their own archives, but from a forgotten alien source. This echoes ancient human philosophy as well. Socrates himself admitted, "All I know is that I know nothing." True wisdom often lies in recognizing that truth may come from beyond your own order, your own people, even your own galaxy. On the planet Atolon, the Jedi Kanan Jarrus encountered the Bendu, a massive entity who proclaimed himself to be the one in the middle. Neither light nor dark, the Bendu was a living embodiment of balance, a force of nature who reminded Kanan that absolutes blind the seeker. This concept resonates deeply with Taoist philosophy. In the Tao Te Ching, Laozi declares, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao." The Bendu lived by this truth. He could not be bound by categories, by labels, or by the simplistic moral binaries that Jedi and Sith alike imposed. He was chaos and order, storm and calm. And in his presence, Kanan learned that mastery of the Force required humility in the face of its greater currents. Long before George Lucas finalized his saga, he spoke of the Journal of the Wills, mysterious beings who recorded the flow of history and perhaps even shaped it. Though shrouded in mystery, the wills tie directly to the concept of the living Force, the immediate, dynamic energy flowing through all beings. Qui-Gon Jinn, the most maverick of Jedi, was deeply attuned to this current. His defiance of the Council stemmed not from arrogance, but from alignment with this deeper truth, that the Force was not to be bound by rigid codes or delayed by endless debate. The wills embody a mythological archetype, the idea of cosmic scribes or watchers who exist outside time. In earthly traditions we find similar motifs in the Book of Life, in Jewish mysticism, or the Norns of Norse myth, who weave fate. The galaxy's story is not written solely by warriors with blades of plasma, but by forces and beings who embody the eternal. Nowhere is the Force's mythic depth clearer than in the Mortis arc of the Clone Wars. There, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka encounter three beings, the Father, the Son, and the Daughter, who represent balance, dark and light, respectively. This is no mere allegory. It is an unveiling of the cosmic truth behind the Force. The imagery is unmistakable. In Christian theology, the Trinity represents unity and division within the divine. In Hinduism, we find Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma as destroyer, preserver, and creator. Mortis is Star Wars' contribution to this universal archetype, a family whose conflict symbolizes the eternal struggle not merely within the galaxy, but within every sentient being. Anakin's role as the Chosen One is revealed not as conquest, but as balance. Yet balance itself is fragile. As the Father warns, you cannot deny what you are. What then is the lesson of all these Force traditions? That the Force cannot be monopolized. The Jedi pursued serenity, the Sith pursued power, but truth is larger. The Night Sisters sought survival through ritual. The Bendu sought balance. The priestesses offered transcendence. Mortis revealed cosmic archetypes. The Wills recorded destiny itself. In every myth, whether on Earth or in the galaxy, far, far away, seekers of truth eventually confront the same paradox. No single tradition holds the full picture. Just as the blind men in the Indian parable each touched one part of the elephant and mistook it for the whole, so too have Jedi and Sith mistaken their fragment of the Force for its totality. The real secret is humility before mystery. The Force flows through all things, manifests in countless forms, and resists every attempt to cage it. So once again we return to the challenge. Are you ready to unlock the true secrets of the Force? To accept this call is not to take up a lightsaber or swear allegiance to one order. It is to embark on a pilgrimage through the galaxy's hidden traditions, to listen as much as to speak, to seek wisdom wherever it may be found. Like Odysseus in Homer's Odyssey, the traveler must endure storms, trials, and temptations, but also discover unexpected allies and forgotten truths. Like Dante in the Divine Comedy, one must descend into shadow, rise through trial, and glimpse the stars anew. The journey is not for the faint of heart. It demands patience, openness, and the courage to question everything you think you know. But for those who dare, the reward is nothing less than transformation. The Force is infinite, and your adventure into its mysteries has only just begun. We all know the Jedi, the noble guardians of peace, wielding their lightsabers as symbols of discipline and restraint. And we all know their opposites, the Sith ambitious seekers of domination, who bend the Force to their will with fire and fury. For generations, the galaxy has framed its destiny through their struggle, as though light and dark were the only two choices, the only two melodies in an eternal song. But what if everything you thought you knew about the Force was just scratching the surface? What if the Jedi and Sith, for all their influence, were merely two currents in a vast and boundless ocean? Beyond the temples and thrones, scattered across forgotten worlds, lie traditions and philosophies that reveal the Force in ways the Jedi archives never fully recorded. The ancient philosopher Heraclitus once declared, "The hidden harmony is better than the obvious." So it is with the Force. The obvious is the clash of sabers, the visible struggle between Republic and Empire, master and apprentice. The hidden lies in places like Dathomir, where the Night Sisters wove incantations from the ichor of their world, channeling the Force through ritual and spell rather than meditation and form. To dismiss this as mere sorcery, as the Jedi often did, is to miss the truth that the Force manifests uniquely through every culture, every perspective. Consider the Bendu, the great being of Atalon, who called himself the One in the Middle. Neither light nor dark, he embodied balance, unpredictability, and the storm itself. His existence reminds us of a teaching echoed in Taoism. The Tao is like a well, used but never used up. It is like the eternal void, filled with infinite possibilities. The Force, too, cannot be confined to categories. It is not a binary. It is a living, infinite field of possibility. Even the Jedi's own history reveals this truth. Yoda, one of the greatest masters of all, did not discover the path to immortality within the Order's walls, but through the Force priestesses, mysterious beings embodying emotions beyond doctrine. Through them, he learned the secret of becoming one with the Force beyond death. What greater irony than this? The Jedi's most profound power came not from their own archives, but from an older, stranger path they had nearly forgotten. And then there is Mortis, the realm where the father, son, and daughter dramatized the eternal cycle of balance, shadow, and light. Their story is myth made manifest, echoing world traditions from the Hindu Trimurti to the Christian Trinity, reminding us that the Force is not just an energy field, but a living mythos, shaping itself into archetypes that mortals can comprehend. So prepare to have your understanding of the Force irrevocably expanded. The Jedi and Sith gave us one story, but they were never the only story. To follow the unseen paths is to step into a galaxy of wonder, to encounter truths that challenge every certainty, and to realize that the Force is not owned by any order. It is vast, it is eternal, and its mysteries are waiting for those bold enough to seek them. The Jedi spoke of the Force as an energy that binds the galaxy together. The Sith spoke of it as a weapon to bend destiny. Yet behind both, whispered in fragments across history, lie the enigmatic wills, guardians, scribes, and perhaps even architects of cosmic design. Their presence is elusive, their nature almost mythic, and yet, whenever the deepest mysteries of the Force are uncovered, the shadow of the wills lingers just beyond the veil. The earliest conception of Star Wars began not with the Jedi or the Sith, but with the Journal of the Whills. George Lucas himself once described them as beings who chronicled the rise and fall of galactic history, perhaps standing outside of time, shaping and recording the eternal flow. Their role is less as warriors and more as cosmic archivists, reminding us that the Force is not only to be wielded, it is to be understood. Here lies their true wisdom. The Force is not merely a current to be directed, but a living, breathing entity. The wills suggest that it is less like a tool and more like a companion, a great river into which every living being flows. To quote the Roman philosopher Marcus Aurelius, "What is not good for the beehive cannot be good for the bee." The Force, in will philosophy, reflects this same truth. No being exists in isolation. To live is to participate in a greater whole. It is through the wills that the controversial idea of midi-chlorians takes on new meaning. Often dismissed as sterile or clinical, midi-chlorians are not meant to reduce the Force to biology, but to act as interpreters, microscopic bridges that allow life to commune with the infinite. Just as mystics across earthly traditions spoke of intermediaries between humanity and the divine angels in Abrahamic faiths, daemons in Greek thought, or bodhisattvas in Buddhism, so too do midi-chlorians serve as mediators, attuning mortals to the eternal voice of the Force. Qui-Gon Jinn, often considered the most will-like Jedi, grasped this better than most. He listened not to council decrees, but to the will of the living Force, a philosophy echoing Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching: man follows the earth follows the universe follows the Tao. The Tao follows what is natural. For Qui-Gon, the Force was never abstract dogma, it was the pulse of reality itself, felt moment by moment. His openness led him to discover the secret of immortality, a truth hidden even from the Jedi archives. In this light, the wills represent the ultimate counterpoint to the endless Jedi-Sith conflict. Where one order sought harmony and the other domination, the wills sought comprehension. They remind us that the truest power is not in victory, but in perspective, not in control, but in attunement. To study their wisdom is to see the Force as it was always meant to be seen, not as battlefield, but as cosmos. The wills are less warriors than watchmen, less conquerors than chroniclers. And perhaps that is their greatest lesson, that the Force is not ours to own. It is ours to witness, to revere, and to pass on. To step beyond the citadels of the Jedi and the obsidian temples of the Sith is to stumble into stranger territories, worlds where the Force manifests not as doctrine, but as living landscape. Few places illustrate this truth more vividly than Dathomir, a planet veiled in crimson mist and steeped in a primal energy that defies conventional categories of light and dark. Here dwell the Night Sisters, practitioners of a tradition often mislabeled as witchcraft. To the Jedi they were dangerous heretics, to the Sith rivals to be feared and exploited. But to themselves, the Night Sisters were not mere servants of shadow. They were heirs of a lineage rooted in survival, ritual, and communion with the spirit of their world. The Night Sisters stand apart because their relationship with the Force is inseparable from their environment. Dathomir itself is saturated with raw power, its very soil, rivers and mists resonating with an untamed vitality. The Ichor, a green glowing essence native to the planet, became the conduit for their spells, enchantments and rituals. In this way, the Night Sisters embody what anthropologists of Earth would call animism, the belief that spirit dwells in all things, and that to interact with nature is to interact with the divine. Unlike the Sith, whose obsession with control often corrupts and consumes them, the Night Sisters' magic does not seek to dominate the Force, but to channel it through ritual. They weave chants, blood sacrifices, and sacred dances into their practice, externalizing power in forms of sorcery that both awe and terrify outsiders. Their abilities include conjuring illusions, bending the will of others, crafting enchanted weaponry, and, most chillingly, manipulating life and death itself. Resurrection, though imperfect, lay within their grasp. It was this necromantic reputation that led many to equate them with dark sorcerers, but such labels obscure the deeper truth. Their art was not merely destructive, but deeply spiritual. As the philosopher Mircea Eliade noted in his studies of world religions, the sacred and the profane are not separate realms, but different modes of experience. For the Night Sisters, the sacred permeated every action. Their rituals were not just displays of power, but acts of communion, binding their clan, their ancestors, and their world together in one living continuum. In comparing the Night Sisters with conventional dark side users, the differences become striking. The Sith viewed emotion as fuel, anger, fear, and hatred sharpened into weapons of will. Their philosophy was individualistic, one Sith seeking dominance over all, master and apprentice locked in a cycle of betrayal. The Night Sisters, by contrast, drew upon collective identity. Their strength lay in sisterhood, ritual unity, and ancestral ties. Where the Sith demanded submission, the Night Sisters demanded participation. Power was shared through ritual, not seized through violence. This distinction echoes mythological archetypes from our own world. The Sith, in many ways, resemble figures like Milton's Lucifer, rebellious, ambitious, obsessed with selfhood. The Night Sisters resemble instead the covens of witches in European folklore, or the priestesses of ancient mystery cults who worked collectively to commune with forces beyond mortal comprehension. Their strength was not in isolated genius, but in communal rite. Even their use of death reveals this divergence. When the Sith pursue immortality, it is through domination. Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious sought to twist life itself into submission. The Night Sisters, however, did not seek eternal rule, but cyclical renewal. Their resurrections were imperfect, bound to ritual, often temporary, but they reflected a worldview closer to shamanistic traditions, where the boundary between life and death was permeable, and the dead were never truly gone. Of course, their art was not without peril. To channel the Ichor was to dance close to corruption, and the Night Sisters were not immune to ambition or vengeance. Mother Talzin, their most famous leader, forged alliances with Darth Maul and even opposed Darth Sidious himself. Yet even in her rise, one sees the difference of philosophy. Talzin's ambition was not purely for self-aggrandizement, but for the survival and elevation of her people. In her, the Night Sisters found both a queen and a prophetess. From the perspective of galactic history, the Night Sisters were often painted as villains, their rituals feared, their world marginalized. But from a broader lens, they embody a vital truth about the Force, that it is not uniform, not bound by the categories of Jedi orthodoxy or Sith tyranny. It flows into culture, into environment, into the marrow of survival itself. To dismiss the Night Sisters as mere dark witches is to miss the profound creativity and resilience of their tradition. Carl Jung once wrote of the shadow as the hidden, repressed aspect of the psyche, dangerous, but also essential for wholeness. The Night Sisters, in this sense, are the shadow of the Force. They represent the parts of its mystery that the Jedi refuse to acknowledge and the Sith could not control. And just as Jung argued that integrating the shadow is essential for true individuation, so too might acknowledging traditions like the Night Sisters be essential for a full understanding of the Force. The tragedy of Dathomir's destruction at the hands of General Grievous and Count Dooku was not just a loss of a people, but the silencing of a unique voice in the symphony of the Force. Yet their legacy endures in Asajj Ventress, in Merrin of the Jedi Fallen Order era, and in the echoes of ritual that continue to ripple across the galaxy. The Night Sisters remind us that the Force is not only about combat or philosophy, it is also about survival, ritual, and the eternal dance between shadow and spirit. They stand as proof that the Force, in its infinite expressions, cannot be owned by any single order. Like the mist of their homeworld, it shifts, flows, and lingers, haunting, beautiful, and essential. In the uncharted regions of the galaxy, beyond the borders of Republic maps and Sith dominions, dwell the enigmatic Aing-Ti monks. To many, they are nothing more than whispers, a reclusive species hidden in the Cathal Rift, known only to a handful of travelers bold or fortunate enough to encounter them. Yet for those who have crossed their path, the Aing-Ti embody a tradition of the Force utterly distinct from the Jedi or the Sith. Their mastery is serene, non-violent, and profoundly attuned to currents that others scarcely perceive. The Aing-Ti reject the language of domination so often associated with the Force. To them the Force is not a blade to be sharpened or a storm to be unleashed, but a river, ever shifting, ever flowing. One does not seize a river, one navigates it. This imagery recalls Heraclitus's ancient dictum, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and he is not the same man." The Aing-Chi live by this truth. They move with the current, not against it, adapting to each moment as it arises, their will aligned not with conquest, but with harmony. Their most extraordinary ability, flow walking, demonstrates this philosophy in action. Unlike the Jedi, whose focus on lightsaber combat and meditative clarity often grounded them in the present, the Aing-Ti learned to traverse hyperspace itself as if it were a living current. Through meditative communion, they could ride the Force through time and space, glimpsing past or future events, even altering perception in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. To outsiders, this seemed impossible, alien, even heretical. But to the Aing-Ti, it was simply another form of navigation. In earthly traditions, we find echoes of this practice. Tibetan monks speak of Tummo meditation, channeling inner fire to transcend natural limits. Hindu yogis describe the siddhis, extraordinary powers attained not for domination, but for deeper insight into reality. Likewise, the Aing-Ti's flow walking is less a weapon and more a revelation, a glimpse into the cosmic currents that connect all things. Philosophically, the Aing-Ti diverge sharply from both Jedi and Sith. The Jedi sought balance through restraint, the Sith through passion and will. The Aing-Ti sought neither control nor denial but participation. To live was to immerse oneself in the river of the Force, acknowledging its power without attempting to cage it. Their teachings resonate with Taoist wisdom. The supreme good is like water, which nourishes all things without striving. In their quiet monasteries, they became embodiments of this principle, flowing where the current led, seeking wisdom in movement rather than in conflict. Perhaps this is why so few have ever encountered them. The Aing-Ti were not missionaries nor conquerors. They did not seek to impose their ways upon the galaxy. Instead, they remained hidden, guardians of a tradition meant for those rare few willing to surrender the illusion of control. To learn from them was to accept humility before the infinite, to see the Force not as a battlefield of absolutes, but as an endless river of becoming. In a galaxy consumed by war, the Aing-Ti monks remind us of another way, a way not of blades or thrones, but of harmony, a way that whispers the Force cannot be owned, only flowed with. When the Bendu is introduced in Star Wars Rebels, he is unlike any other Force entity we have encountered. Neither Jedi nor Sith, neither servant of light nor champion of darkness, the Bendu refers to himself as the One in the Middle. His very being challenges the dichotomy that has dominated galactic history, the eternal struggle between light and dark, order and chaos. Instead, the Bendu embodies balance, an archetype deeply rooted not only in Star Wars mythos, but also in the philosophical traditions that inspired George Lucas, from Taoism to Jungian psychology. The Jedi Code teaches discipline, serenity, and the suppression of emotion. The Sith, in contrast, exalt passion, power, and dominance. Both, however, are bound by extremity. The Bendu dismisses such limitations. To him, the Force is not a binary to be chosen, but a spectrum to be understood. In this sense, he recalls the Taoist principle of Wu Wei, to act in harmony with the flow of nature, not to impose will upon it. His wisdom resonates with the Tao Te Ching's assertion, the Tao that could be told is not the eternal Tao. So too with the Force, it cannot be defined by rigid codes or consumed entirely by darkness. Narratively, the Bendu serves as a foil to both Kanan Jarrus and Ezra Bridger. Kanan, a Jedi survivor of Order 66, is burdened by the remnants of the Jedi Way. Ezra, still young, is vulnerable to temptation from the dark side. The Bendu refuses to guide them in absolutes. He does not prevent Ezra from exploring darker impulses, nor does he insist that Kanan cling to Jedi orthodoxy. Instead, he offers perspective. The universe is vast, the Force is boundless, and wisdom comes not from control, but from understanding. The Bendu's power also distinguishes him. He is no ascetic mystic content with meditation alone. He is a storm embodied. When provoked, he calls down thunder, lightning, and winds of such magnitude that even Grand Admiral Thrawn is unsettled. Here, one might draw parallels to the Old Testament's depiction of Yahweh as a storm god, or to Zeus wielding the thunderbolt. The Bendu, like these archetypal deities, is a manifestation of cosmic power, reminding mortals that balance does not mean passivity. Balance, in his hands, is dynamic, sometimes violent and always humbling. His final confrontation with Kanan leaves us with an unresolved tension. The Bendu falls in battle, yet even in apparent death, he prophesies Thrawn's doom with cryptic foresight. His words suggest that beings such as himself do not perish in a conventional sense, but perhaps dissolve back into the living Force. In this way, the Bendu echoes the Wills, the I Ching Ti, and other mysterious Force traditions, fragments of a larger mosaic that defies simplification. And so, the Bendu leaves us with a question as ancient as the saga itself, if such a being can exist, straddling light and dark, storm and calm, knowledge and mystery. What else might the galaxy still conceal? How many other Force traditions, long hidden in shadow, await rediscovery?